Welcome to Revive at Home. We're going to have a little bit of a different session today. Just the other day, as part of our leadership development at Revive, we had an hour-long Zoom webinar where myself and a friend, Andrew Widdowson, who I'll introduce later, Andrew Murray and Chris Fleetcroft, we talked about church in the new era. What is God saying? What is God doing? What are some of the trends that are happening around the world? So I just want to bring you some snippets from an hour-long conversation that we had about how church is changing in this time. I think you're going to find it challenging and interesting. First of all, here's my intro to the session. Some thoughts. We want to talk about new era churches, how things are shifting. You'll know probably from your own church experience that obviously with the last remarkable 2.5 years, the church has gone through such changes. And as we're coming out of lockdown and beginning to kind of point towards the future, I have found it fascinating. The more I've hung out with leaders and connected with what's happening around the nation and even around the world, how many similar things are happening everywhere. This is really like the turning of a corner for the church. And you'll know, I've been saying, if you follow anything that I write or say, that I do believe we're coming into a new era. So that really requires that we look at the future, I think, with some fresh eyes. So some of the key words as a bit of a preamble before I draw in, I think I'll draw in Andrew Murray first in a minute, but let me do a little bit of a preamble. I think some of the key words for the future are things like, I believe we're coming into a time of greater collaboration than ever before. A little story to that. In the village where Vicky and I are sat right now, in our local village, Revive is collaborating with the local Anglican church and are together running an alpha course. So Tuesday nights at the moment, we've got about 16 people in an alpha course. And we really don't care whether the people that get saved go to the local Anglican church or come to Revive. We just want to see the kingdom come. And I just sense the kiss of the Spirit of God on that kind of thing at the moment, that it is a time to collaborate and not care who pays the most or gets the most glory or gets the most converts. We really have to begin to work as one team. It's a time to innovate. I think historically we've looked at church and thought, well, it has to have a Sunday service, a kids work, a youth group, and the little list goes on of what we think a legit church is like. But at the moment, I think there are churches bubbling up that look more like outreaches. There are churches bubbling up that look more like houses of prayer. I think we might even find churches bubbling up that look more like businesses in the way that they are gathering business people or governmental people. We used to talk about kind of church and parachurch, didn't we? I think there's a complete blend as we begin to realize, let's get the job done. There's something about, I heard a phrase today by a friend of mine. He was speaking at the Elim conference, and he said, it's time to get away from the intoxication of large gatherings. I'm going to say that again. It is time to do away with the intoxication of large gatherings. Something is happening where the mission has to become more important than the meetings. And let's be honest, we have, whatever we say from our pulpits or think we believe, our behavior, for many of us would say, we really think this is perhaps more about meetings than it really is. The first contribution I want to play you is from Andrew Murray. I asked him, what did he think God was saying to the church in this season? What things are really important for us to be looking at and going after?
Well, my goodness. I mean, as you've already said, we're living in such a prophetic time where I think God is saying so much that you could literally come up with a dozen kind of things that God is saying. And if you were trying to order them in kind of a priority, we could all order them differently, couldn't we? Because it's like everything is needed, everything's necessary, everything's important. Probably the one thing I just kind of stress just in kind of the few minutes that I got would actually not be a new thing at all. It would be the first thing that Jesus said to his disciples before he told them to do anything, which was to be filled with the Spirit of God. Wait here in Jerusalem until the Holy Spirit has been poured out upon you. And it seems to me, particularly in the UK, that over the past couple of decades, we built churches that were very strong in organization and very attractional in their kind of way of doing things. Great worship, great communication, great programs, great strategy, a great show, and great. And we've seen churches become more contemporary, and it's all been good stuff. And yet it seems to me that so many of our churches now are full of people that have never truly had an encounter with the Spirit of God.
Wow.
And I think a large realization, really, in the pandemic, the reason we've seen a lot of people fall away from God, from faith, and from church is because we've been very good at getting people into church. We've been very good getting people kind of into our gathering, but getting them into God, getting them into an encounter with God, and a place where they've encountered the presence of God and their hearts are burning for Jesus. I think that's something that we've really missed out on. It seems like even Paul wrote to the Galatians, and I think Galatians is one of the earliest letters that Paul wrote. And he said, you guys began in the Spirit, but now you're doing things in the flesh.
Wow.
And so Paul had to write to this church, which was only a couple of decades after the day of Pentecost, and saying, you guys have moved away from the Spirit and fire and glory that the church was birthed in. And it seems like every now and again, God almost has to remind the church, okay, you're relying too much now on the machinery and the mechanics and the organization of church, and you need to get back to that upper room experience. And I think that, a lot of the problems that we have got right now in the church are not fully solved by a move of the Spirit, but it will go a long way.
Yeah.
So I think, we talk about, we have a discipleship problem. I think it starts with a fire problem, or we're struggling to get volunteers. Again, all this kind of stuff, I think, will be helped drastically if hearts are burning for Jesus and hearts are burning for the Spirit of God. I think that when it comes to discipleship, I don't think we have a discipleship problem. I think we have a salvation problem, in that, you just mentioned it just then, that we've often reduced salvation to hand up, repeat a prayer, rather than people truly being born again by the Spirit of God. And I think when people have had an encounter with God, when the hearts are burning for God, they will want to serve, they will want to come to church, they'll want to pray, they'll want to be at the prayer meeting, they'll want to go on mission, they'll want to tell people about Jesus, and all that kind of stuff. And so I think right now, and I'm hearing now a lot of what I would say attractional churches that very rarely mentioned, if you listen to their preaching and their teaching and the stuff that was coming from their platforms, would very rarely mention the presence of God or the Holy Spirit. But now, coming out of the pandemic, I'm hearing a lot of these churches kind of saying, we need to get back to prayer. We need to get back to seeking the face of God. We need to get back to the presence of God. We need to get back to being filled with the Holy Spirit. It's almost like we've come to that realization that great church services, that the structure of church, but without the infilling of the presence of God, will not sustain people in this hour that we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think the world is attracted anymore by our show or by our presentation or by our performance. I think people are desperately searching for the power and the presence and the glory of God. And I think Of course, as Pentecostal Christians, we all think that we've got the Spirit of God. But usually by what we mean by that is we'll occasionally put on a meeting, like a special meeting where we lay hands on people. But I'd love to kind of really walk out, what would it look like for a church to give themselves fully to pursuing the face of Jesus and the presence of God, and truly give themselves to be in that place of glory and that place of encounter. And let me just kind of just tie in two other things real quickly, because of course when we talk about revival, outpouring, the glory of God, the presence of God, of course that can become just as much a show as a seeker sensitive attractional church. And kind of coming and getting your cappuccino in the foyer and listening to a 25-minute relevant talk can be a show, but also can come listen to the evangelist and he lays hands on you and you fall on the carpet and go home. That can just be as much a show as the former. So I think everything being grounded in community and family is absolutely essential. That it's not about what's happening on the stage. In fact, I do away with the stage. I don't like stages anymore. But everything being grounded around the table, that sense of you're not coming to church for the man of God to pray for you, but actually that sense of, as a community, as a family, we're going after God together. We're praying together. We're going after the presence of God together. Food is absolutely essential. The table, conversation, laughter, that real sense of family and community, that sense of teaching and equipping. So it's not just come to receive an emotional touch, but come to actually be equipped and trained so that you can go out on mission and you can carry the glory of God and the love of Christ wherever you go in your world. All that stuff, but right at the heart, right at the center, the fire of the Holy Spirit, setting hearts ablaze for God. And I'm convinced more than ever that as a minister of Jesus, my primary role is to keep the lamp burning and to keep that sense of a move of the Holy Spirit burning in people's lives so that people can not only be sustained by that fire, but also they can carry that fire into their workplaces and wherever they go.
Wow, that was great. I then went on to ask our very own Chris Fleetcroft, what were the things that he felt God was really putting his finger on right now? What are the things that for prophetic people like Chris and I really frustrate us, and that's part of God's message of, come on, move into something new. Here's what Chris had to say.
Actually, what you tweeted and what you just read out at the start of this Zoom call kind of sums up where I'm at. That we need to stop the obsession of the big show, and that we need to make sure the mission is greater than the meeting. We all know, and I was growing up in church, we were always saying that the church is not a building, it's the people. It's not a service, it's the people. But our actions and don't line up with the rhetoric that we give. I mean, as church leaders, we seem to be more obsessed with service times, service teams, how we're running the mechanics of church, when actually the church is about great people.
Wow, radical stuff, right? Just then, the last snippet that I can give you before we start to do the questions and the discussions. I asked a dear friend of mine that I've known for about 30 years, who we've been involved in planting churches with over the years. This guy has seen it and done it in ministry, but currently he is working as a teacher in a school and is seeing a remarkable move where over the last couple of years they've started to gather lots and lots of unsaved people and build a truly remarkable Christ-like community. And it all began with a dream. Here's Andrew telling you about his dream and how they've begun to outwork a new, what they call missional community rather than a classic Sunday morning church, and how it is reaching people around them. Listen up. There could be some real kernels of inspiration in what he has to say.
I had a dream one night, and we have a lovely lake at the side, and my classroom looks out from this over this lake. And I had this dream, and I saw balls of fire coming and hitting the lake.
Wow.
And what I thought was water was shooting out of the lake and covering the community like a 2-mile radius around the school. But as I looked closer, it wasn't droplets of water. It was actually missional communities that were landing all over the Beeston, Chilwell, Toton area. And I really felt God say that there's some favor on this with the school. And out of this is going to come missional communities. Soon after that, we started to see Hong Kongers arrive, because the situation in Hong Kong, the British government have said, we've created part of this mess. We handed it over to China. 50 years, it shouldn't have been touched with all of the rules and the regulations and the human rights. China tore up the rule book. In 2019, we see the protests take place. And as a result, the British government said, we will give you a visa to come over to here, settle in the UK. And we had our first family arrive April last year into the school. And so I talked to the guys and I said, look, we're a welcome church. Why don't we give welcome boxes to the Hong Kongers? And cut a long story short, knocked on one door, gave the welcome box. We then, over about a 3-month period, did 35 welcome boxes.
Wow.
And you suddenly go from 6 people in October 2020 gathering in your living room to start a missional community, to having an influx of Hong Kong people who are fantastic. They've been absolutely great. And so now when we gather, I've totally detached from numbers, but there's about 60, 70 people that are gathering. And part of that, a big part of that has been the influx of people from Hong Kong.
Wow.
If you look at numerically, we call it Waterside Missional Community. If you look numerically, of those 60 or 70 people, about 25% have faith.
Wow.
The rest have no faith. They're open to it, but they've not professed Christ. They've not made a commitment to be a disciple of Jesus. But the things that Chris was talking about, sitting around the table, fun, family, has really attracted these guys, and they've become friends. So we're starting to see these guys come to faith. We do have non-Hong Kongers with us, but we got one lady, and she said to us, you know what? She says, God brought me to the UK to find Jesus.
Wow.
And she's now doing one-to-one Bible study with my wife, and it's amazing to see just how from a simple thing of let's give a welcome box, this whole thing just mushroomed out.
Yeah. Well, I hope you've got something from all of that. Can you notice some themes of gathering together in a more informal way? Tables, food, places to ask questions, true relationship rather than just church services. Knowing that we really do have to make sure the mission is more important than the meetings. We've got to fall out of this intoxication with meetings. We need to have them, we need to gather, but we must realize that the mission is more important than having polished worship services, and we need to somehow get back to that. I'm going to leave you to check out some questions on the screen to discuss and pray and really stretch your thinking about how God can lead us into a new era that sees a great harvest and kingdom come all around us wherever we go.